and welcome to this week's live weekly warm-up. This one is a little bit of a wacky exercise that I think is going to be fun. It may or may not work for you. It's maybe a little bit more advanced, I suppose. And a lot of people probably haven't necessarily done this because it's kind of an interesting extended technique. What we're going to be doing today is actually playing multiphonics and using multiphonics as a way to sort of work on our voicing and sort of learn where the voicing is. First of all, if you don't know what voicing is, voicing has to do with sort of like how you're aiming for a note. It's really important when you're starting to play the higher notes, because if you don't have the correct voicing, you could go for like a high G and you either get where you get that sort of grunt or undertone, or you might get an overtone or a squeak instead of. So we have to know how to aim properly at the notes so that they can sound their best. And what that voicing comes down to is a little bit sort of where our tongue is, how our tongue's aiming the air, how much embouchure pressure we have, like the way that the embouchure is sort of leaning on the reed, and that's what creates the voicing. So what we're going to do is a multiphonic, and what multiphonics are basically where you do kind of like a funky fake fingering that's not a normal fingering for a normal note, and you sort of aim in between the overtone and the undertone, and you can actually hear both of them at the same time. You may have heard kind of a bit of a multiphonic when I was going for the undertone on the G. That's probably super soft, but you can kind of hear there's a little bit of like the grunt and undertone and also a little bit of the high note, and they're kind of both happening at the same time. With multiphonics, you do sort of like a special fingering that makes it easier to land in between. So it's not like a higher note fingering, it's not quite a lower note fingering, and you meet somewhere in between. So what we're going to do for this exercise is play our multiphonic, but we're going to intentionally hit just the overtone and then intentionally move down to just the undertone. And hopefully in the middle, we'll hear both of them and we'll figure out how to intentionally hit that as well. So the multiphonic we're going to be using for this one is a pretty easy one, and you can pretty clearly hear both of the notes. It's the two notes that should sound are a G and a B. Those two notes. And the fingering we're going to use for it is the high B fingering, but instead of this finger being on the hole, we're going to press the G sharp key with it instead. So it's just exactly the same as a high B, or a middle B, I suppose, middle of the staff B with the register key. Take your first finger off, put it on the G sharp side key. And that's the fingering. So what we're going to do is play just the overtone. So maybe think about like aiming really high, maybe being just a little bit firmer with your embouchure, and then relax, 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 and try to dip down into the undertone. See what happens. It should sound something like this. And that's a really clear, just the undertone, just the G. You can get a really clear overtone of just the B. Maybe. And then if you can aim right in between those. Then you can get a nice multiphonic, and it takes a bit of work to find that sweet spot. So let me try it one more time, and I'm going to go sort of like up and down, moving through it, and I'm going to sort of narrow my way into finding that sweet spot in the middle. And you can sort of play with the balance of getting more of the undertone, more of the overtone, and finding that like best balance between the two that sounds really, really cool when it comes out effectively and correctly. Now, the reason why this is a useful exercise, even if you're not practicing multiphonics or you don't need to actually play multiphonics, is because it really trains your body how to think about voicing and really forces you to have sort of an independence between the air and the embouchure. I find to get that going the best, it's almost like my embouchure is voicing the G, but my tongue position is voicing the B. So there's like a little bit of a independence there between the tongue and the embouchure. That's kind of just what it feels like to me. I don't know if that's necessarily useful to think about when you're doing this. As with pretty much all warm-ups, you can try thinking about the things that I say, but most importantly, it's about experimenting for yourself and seeing what makes it work. So that's just a little bit of a wacky exercise that I think is a little bit of fun to sort of try a new technique, see how that comes across. Leave a comment if you're able to successfully get a really good multiphonic. That'd be awesome. They do take a little bit of work and a little bit of practice to sort of find where they are. And the first step is to be able to play the higher note, play the lower note, and then you can find what it feels like to be right in between the two. So that's all I got for this week's live weekly warm-up. Let me know how you liked it. Next week, and actually for November, I'm going to be really digging into the next generation clarinet method. So the live weekly warm-up may get a little bit spotty and not be quite weekly. But if I'm not on, it's because I'm working on the book, and version 3 is going to be awesome. The stuff that I've put into it already is great, and the plans that I have for it is going to be really, really great. So if you don't see me as regular, that's why. But keep doing your warm-ups. There's a whole plethora of previous videos for you to check out. And I'll probably see you next week. Probably. But maybe not. But anyways, have a good week. Let me know how your multiphonics go in the comments, and I'll see you next time.